This is section 1.6, describing pairs of angles. So we're going to talk about a bunch of different names today to how to describe two angles. So the first term we have is complementary angles. You should have heard this before. Complementary angles are two angles that add up to 90 degrees. So that could look like two angles that are right next to each other that form a right angle, like angle 1 and angle 2. You know it's a right angle by that little box put there. So angles 1 and 2 are complementary. It could also be two separate angles that don't share any sides in common, as long as their degrees match or add up to 90. So in this case, angle A and angle B, 20 plus 70 is 90. So they are complementary angles. Supplementary angles, you should also know this word. Supplementary angles are two angles that add up to 180 degrees. Remember, 180 degrees is a straight line. So angles 3 and 4, they share a side, and when you put them together, they form a straight line, or 180 degrees. Or it could look like angles C and D, where they don't share a side in common, but when you add up their angle measures, they do indeed add up to 180 degrees. Adjacent angles are two angles that share a common vertex and a side. So in this case, angles 5 and 6 are adjacent. They also happen to be supplementary. Note that that's not always going to be the case. If we go back, angles 3 and 4 are also adjacent, and up here, angles 1 and 2 are also adjacent. Notice that they have that side in common. So that's what it means to be adjacent. And then linear pairs. A linear pair are two adjacent angles that are supplementary. So they're adjacent and supplementary gives you linear. Notice that in the word linear you see the word line. That tells you that they form a line. And then we have vertical angles. Vertical angles are two angles whose sides form two pairs of opposite rays. So what we're looking for here is basically two straight lines are crossing, and to be vertical angles, they're directly across from each other. So angles 4 and 5 are vertical, and angles 3 and 6 are vertical. So let's do some examples that use these kinds of terms. So find the measure of angle 2 and the measure of angle 3. So the first one, to find the measure of angle 2, we know by looking at that box that angles 1 and 2 are complementary. Okay, so when they're complementary, we know that they add up to 90 degrees. So if I'm going to call this x, I know that 62 plus x has to equal 90. So minus 62 minus 62, x equals 28. So the measure of angle 2 is 28 degrees. Same thing kind of works for the next example, except now they're not complementary. They form a line. They are supplementary. We could also call them a linear pair because they are adjacent and supplementary. I'm going to name angle 3. I'm going to name that A. You can pick whatever letter you want. And I know that they're supplementary, so they add up to 180 degrees. So I know that 47 plus A equals 180. So subtract 47, A equals 133. So we have 133 degrees for the measure of angle 3. All right, and then our last example, two angles form a linear pair. The measure of one angle is 5 times the measure of the other angle. Find the measure of each angle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw what this looks like. Since they are a linear pair, I know that they form a line. All right, so I'm going to draw here and split it into two angles. All right, I don't know how big each of those angles are, so it's going to not be a great drawing. Let's move on to the next sentence. The measure of one angle is 5 times the measure of the other angle. So I'm going to take that smaller angle and I'm going to name that x. I'm going to say that's x degrees. So the measure of the other angle is 5 times the measure of that angle. So the bigger angle is going to be 5x. Now I need to write an equation to try to find x in order to find the measure of each of the two angles. So since it's a linear pair, I know it's supplementary, which means they add up to 180 degrees. So that means if I take my 5x plus x, it equals 180. Simplify the left side to get 6x equals 180. Divide both sides by 6, so x equals 30. So we know that one angle is 30 degrees. And now let's try to find the other one. We can either take 180 minus 30, that'll work, or we can just plug 30 in for x here. Either way, you're going to get 150 degrees. So one angle is 30 degrees and one angle is 150 degrees. When you're doing these problems, when in doubt, just draw a picture using the words that they give you. Your picture is not going to be perfect, but it'll at least give you a visual representation that's easier to go off of than words.